If BJ and Nathan want to come on up, I will say I think that laid a lot of good groundwork for this afternoon's or the later presentation on workforce development. There's a lot of connective tissue between what was just shared and what's coming up. I do understand some folks. I know if we do it at a hotel, we usually get the notepad and stuff like that. If you didn't forget it, we are providing what we functionality as a volunteer and supported by providing some notepads and pens in the back of the room if you'd like those. Our next session, one of the largest economic centers in Missouri, and an area that is often overlooked is rural Missouri. It is difficult to get to. It is hard to finance projects there, but it is a growing area. There's a report that just came out that there are a number of rural communities that are growing extremely fast in the Midwest, a lot in certain areas of Nebraska and central Iowa. I think there are places in Missouri that are doing the same. And to do that, when we look at where industry is going, and we're looking where people are moving, we really need to make sure that those resources and options are available for them, so we can see the economic growth provided to everybody in the state. So we have a great session here for you today, and talk about two of the ways, both from USDA and the Department of Economic Development, what options are there, what we're doing to address it, provide more options, provide accessibility, which increases access, and it is all related to energy in a variety of ways. So with that, I would like to invite up BJ Kingsley from the Department of Economic Development. Just as a reminder, I didn't get to say this before, if you are online and you want to ask questions, this is set up as a meeting, so just use the chat function, and we will get that to the speakers for them to be able to present to you. But without that, BJ, thank you so much for coming. Look forward to your report.
Thank you, Josh. Very much appreciate the opportunity. As far as running slides, just say arrow or click. Okay, perfect. I am BJ Kingsley. I'm the director of the Office of Broadband. Hopefully not everyone has heard this before. I feel like I give these speeches quite a bit, kind of push go, and here we go again. I know Dennis has, but that's okay. We are really, that was a great introduction, and kind of a little bit about the cross section between here. We're going to be making, or we have been, in that we invested about $261 million in broadband across the state. Those projects are starting or ongoing. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then starting in 2024, is the largest investment in broadband across the United States. But in Missouri, we were allocated a little over $1.7 billion to invest in bringing broadband to every location that doesn't currently have it or isn't funded to be served by another program. So there's going to be a ton of work going on out there. So for you all that are in the energy world, think about that. And what I want to, and I may not talk about it in every slide, but it's an opportunity for areas that may not have had the connectivity that was necessary to do these things. But also, it's a little bit of a warning that those places that you may have assets, there are going to be other people doing work in those areas to try to get these deployments done. So be prepared for that and hopefully work kindly with those people trying to bring connections. Josh did a great job of laying out. Honestly, I didn't ask him to, but the reason why I'm here, I come from rural Missouri, originally from Southeast Missouri, worked for Farm Bureau for about 10 years, and largely spent a lot of time talking about rural Missouri, the things that rural Missouri needed to be able to succeed. And one of the things that a lot of rural Missourians don't have, and some of our urban and suburban Missourians, is quality access to high-speed internet. And we know every day today, half the attendees or more of this meeting are, sitting in an office or at home, working from home and doing those things. But if you don't have a high-speed connection, that's a reality that a lot of Missourians face. We estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 locations across the state of Missouri that don't currently have access. And if you're living in that world, there's just things you can't do and you struggle with. And so one of the things I say a lot is we want to make sure that Missourians can choose to live where they want to, not where they have to, based on the services available. We'll start by looking back just a little bit, what we were able to do with the funds allocated to us by the General Assembly and the governor's investment in broadband. Through the ARPA funded broadband program, we were allocated $265 million basically, and we were able to award 261 of those. We were able to fund 60 projects, working with 30 different providers all across the state, and making over 54,000 connections. We were really excited about that. Obviously, in this program, you also see where the providers brought in a significant amount of funding. It's something that should never be forgotten. We talk about we funded this, we did that, but the truth is none of this happens without willing providers out there. There's a lot of places, these places are expensive. There's not the density of customer. Yes, sir.
Connections, is that people, is that households?
That's locations. We don't try to go to the next step of estimating how many people live in each house. Those are locations. Yeah. And so, but it takes a willing provider to do this. These are rural areas, less dense in customers. A lot of these also face geography challenges, hard rock to go through, and then also a lot of trees if you're using other technologies or if you're trying to go through them. So tough to reach areas where they probably already would be served, but we were able to really get a jump start with this and very excited. Of the 60 projects, we have a handful that are already complete. About half of them are started or about 50% of the way complete, and then the rest of them are, kind of in the pipeline. Some companies were provided won multiple awards, so they're finishing one and then starting the next. So you'll be able to see those progressing over the next couple of years, but these funds all have to be spent because they're ARPA funds. We have to have them out the door by the end of 2026, I believe. My dates all run together a little bit, so you'll have to forgive me a little bit on that. We also were allocated $20 million in a cell tower grant program. This was to bring base level connectivity to places that struggle with it. We were very excited about this, although it was something the office had never done before. So it took a while to get out and really wrap our heads around how do we best do this. But on October 20th, we were able to award our round one recipients about $12 million, so over half of the funding, with 29 individual towers being funded, impacting 41 counties across the state of Missouri. And here you'll see a map of where those are. So we're really excited about this as well. My kind of quip about this is, if you don't have a cellular connection, you're really behind. In an emergency situation, that is base level connectivity that we all rely on. And it's a reality out there in our rural areas that some places have struggled with this. And so we're hopeful that this will help in the areas. And then also, as you saw, we were able to award 12 million of those funds, and we had about just under 8 million left over. And so we actually are in the middle of round two right now. There's a challenge process where the provider can say, hey, we already serve that area, we have a tower in that area. That way we're not spending funds where there should already be service. And so we're in that challenge window right now. And that puts us on a timeline to be able to award round two. Around the first of the year, depending on how the challenge process wraps up. But we're very excited to be able to get all of these projects in line and started to progress through the process by early, 2024. Really excited about that opportunity. And like I said, changing that connectivity or that base level of connectivity in these places. And you can see specifically with the cell tower program, we specifically focused it. In rural Missouri, it had to be a population density of less than 50 per mile or per square mile. And so we really did try to put this in places most likely to be in need. And when I kind of have previewed what we see in round two, some of the places where there's a distance between towers, you can see in round two, they're likely to be awarded in those areas as well. But we'll looking ahead to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funded programs. Our office is actually receiving two different main tranches of funding through that. And you may or may not have heard of these. I talked about the 1.7 billion. That is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Act. We call it the BEAD program. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But in addition to BEAD, which is really focused on infrastructure, there is also the Digital Equity Act. We call our plan the Digital Opportunity Plan. And it is really focused on the non-infrastructure barriers to broadband adoption. And that's a lot of words to say what other than having a connection keeps people from engaging in online activity. Is it access to devices? Is it comfort level with the skills or the tools necessary to be able to engage? Is it the affordability of the connection? And so with the Digital Equity Act funding, We'll be able to address some of those things. I don't want to stand up here and say we'll fix everything across the world, but we will be able to help and work with partners to try to address some of those things. And so we put out our plan in mid-October, sharing our Digital Equity Act plan. And this is where we go into detail of what we see across the state of Missouri. The truth is there are a lot of Missourians that can't afford a $100 a month plan, even if it was available at their location. There are also a lot of Missourians that when you talk about, hey, why don't you engage online? They say they don't see the value in it, or they don't trust it. You know, they hear every day about identity being stolen and they don't feel comfortable fully engaging that way. And so this is how we will try to get at some of those things. The truth is, in areas like St. Louis and Kansas City, there's a pretty healthy ecosystem of people talking about digital equity, talking about affordable devices. There's major companies that recycle their devices and get them out to nonprofits to do those kinds of things, to get them out into the hands of people in need. There's people out there promoting the Affordable Connectivity Program, which helps bridge that gap of affordability. But when we went to rural Missouri and talked about, hey, is there anyone that works on digital equity? They were like, what? What are you talking about? You know, with the library might have an educational time, you know, once a month or things like that. And so that's the real challenge we see. And if you dive into the plan, if you're interested enough to do so, what you'll see is one of the main things we point out is we want to make sure that all Missourians, no matter where they live, have access to these types of support too, working with community action agencies, working with those trusted partners. And so what we see is the discrepancy between urban and rural, which is not unusual, but we'll try to devise a program that will happen in likely late 2024, early 2025 to work on both, work on a statewide focus, but then also a competitive process that will allow people that are already engaged in this to size up the impact of the programs that they're currently doing. So we're excited about that. This is our vision statement. I won't read it to you, but it basically says we want to make sure that all Missourians have the skills necessary to fully engage in the digital world. Kind of the tagline for the Department of Economic Development is we want to make sure that all Missourians can prosper. And we think that this is a major piece of that, both access physically and the skills necessary to engage in the digital world. It's one thing to do that. The other thing that you'll see pointed out in our digital equity plan is we want these people who may or may not have been connected in the past, not just to be one-way users of the internet. We don't want them just to be consumers. We also want them to be able to produce, whether that's running their own small business or if it is working from home and not just being educated, not just being entertainment and social media, but also being producers when they take that opportunity to do so. So you'll see we try to go beyond I say it a lot, although I don't mean to pick on them, but beyond Amazon and Netflix and Facebook, that's really the plan is let's get them above that base level skill so people are able to, if they choose to. We don't want to tell anybody what they have to do. But moving on, the biggest investment that we're talking about is the BEAD program. That's where Missouri was allocated the $1.7 billion, and largely it is to bridge the gap between those who have access and those who do not. And that's what our allocation was based off of. When we heard this summer that we were getting the $1.7 billion, a lot of people said, oh, congratulations, congratulations. I'm like, congratulations, no. Like, it just means we have a huge amount of work to do over the next several years. It would be much better if Missouri had only got $100 million. That meant that most people already had a connection. This is truly a measurement of the fact that we have a lot of people and we have a lot of people that still don't have access. Some of the western states complain that Missouri got a lot of funding. And I think that's really a reflection of the state, that we aren't as rural as the Kansases and Nebraskas and others, but we still have a lot of people without access. So $1.7 billion, like I said, the goal is to connect all Missourians. We can only spend these funds on what are called eligible locations. And those are people that are unserved or underserved, but also haven't been funded through another program, whether that was Missouri's programs that you heard us talking about, but also the USDA has had their investments in broadband, as well as the FCC's RDOF and CAF programs, which have major investments across the state too. And so that really does help with the opportunity to bridge the gap. But if you're talking to Missourians, it also lays out kind of an interesting map of the state. A lot of people call us every day, and we love the calls, right? But they say, hey, I don't have access to service, and we can look them up on the map, and then we can say, well, yes, you don't have service, we understand that, we'll be able to fund it. Or a lot of times we have to say, you have been funded, but it may be a while. This map doesn't show up real well, but we do have maps on our website if anybody's interested in details. But what you see there is a map of the state, and largely you can see, served areas, and the red reflects unserved, yellow underserved, but then the blue is what's already been funded, and that's about half of the gap, truthfully. And so we are focused, or what we will be focusing these funding on, is getting to those remaining locations that still don't have access. When we do some high-level cost modeling of this, the estimated cost to cover these locations is about 1.4, a little bit more than that, $1 billion. Like I said, we're receiving slightly more than that. But the reason that we're cautiously optimistic rather than saying, yes, we can finish. Every reporter that calls says, so are you really going to be able to get service to everyone? And I'm like, well, everyone is a pretty high bar. Like every single location is a pretty high bar. There's new developments every day, but also the money says we should be able to. But there's also what happens with inflation when all of this hits at one given time. We have to have a willing provider willing to go to those locations. So there are some hurdles that still make us cautious on our optimistic side. Hopefully these show up a little bit better. You all may be familiar, but when we talk about served and unserved and funded and unfunded, these are two kind of examples of what we see across the state of Missouri. The one on the left, actually, I believe is Bollinger County, Missouri. What you see there are a lot of lime green dots. Those are funded to be served, but don't have service. The red dots remaining are the ones where we could bring service. And so you can see kind of the challenge there if you're trying to reach all of those red dots is, well, you can get funding for those, but not necessarily for the rest of them. But it also shows the frustration that the citizen sees in that, hey, I'm funded to be served. It could be 5 or 6 years from now. And really when I have to tell them, I'm sorry, this funding isn't going to come to your location. But we can also all understand the fact that you don't want to spend funds where other funds are already going to deliver that. The other map is Southwest County, not far from Springfield, surprisingly, but that shows what we also see in some counties where it is dramatically unserved and underserved and will be available for funding. It's basically all of the populated areas, but you can see there's hundreds of fundable locations in this county. But you can see what we're seeing when we talk to providers is you're facing two different situations. Situations where you're definitely just finishing it, and situations where you have a major project to undertake to take this on. Yes.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Just for perspective wise, each dot represents like what geographic area?
Each dot is actually a location. So that could be a business or a house or a government office. Those are all individual locations. Now remember, these are rural counties, so even if we put it over St. Louis, it would just black out of locations. But these are actually individual locations, mostly homes and businesses.
I'm sorry also if I missed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the definition of underserved?
So underserved is not having access to 100 by 20 service. So 100 download, 20 upload speed.
It's about speed.
Yeah, it's about speed. And then unserved at this point, to be considered unserved is you don't have access to 25 by 3 service. And so that's 25 download, 3 upload. It is shocking to someone who's been talking broadband for 10 years. 10 years ago, we were begging people to deploy 25 by 3, and now 25 by 3 is considered just getting you into that underserved bracket. Things are moving quickly, which I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know when it comes to that. Just looking ahead, potential timeline, we are past a couple of those. We will turn in our plans. Actually, if anyone is really deeply interested in this, I hope you all are, but if you're planning on applying or interested in that, our plans for how we would facilitate this are open for public comment until December 15th. So you can go to the DED website, find those, and weigh in on how we plan to invest these funds. Our proposals are due to Department of Commerce, NTIA, the funding partner, December 27th. And then we will actually in early 2024 start the process of how do we do this. Step one in layman's terms is let's prove the maps. We give providers, government entities, nonprofits, and likely citizens the ability to weigh in on the service map. So you saw the complicated dots. They can go in and say, no, my dot doesn't have service, or yes, I already provide service to these locations. Let's prove the maps. Then we say, okay, then we know I call it our monopoly board of locations. These are the places we serve, these are the places we can't, and then we start the process of making grants available. We think that looks like April, May, depending on how the challenge process goes. We have to finish one before we can jump to another, but that will be in spring when we start taking applications, which puts us on a timeline of starting to make awards August, September, and then we will have to very quickly start round 2 of the process. So we have to move very quickly with this. We had hoped for more time to do it, but NTIA is holding us to 365 days to award these funds. And so we will be rolling as quickly as we can while still being careful with what we're doing in order to get these funds, all of the locations awarded within 365 days. There are a few other things that we can do with the funds if we had leftover funds. With those funds, that's when we would be able to invest in workforce. There's a lot of talk with the Department of Energy about workforce, and we would like to do that too. NTIA allows us to, but only so much as we have already proven that we can bring service to everyone. Then we can make direct investments in workforce. And before that, a willing provider or applying provider would have to apply for that as part of their grant request. We can fund them that way, but otherwise we have to prove that we can serve everyone before we can go into those other pieces. So that largely wraps up my comments, but really, like I said, I want to circle back to, you've seen the maps. Hopefully you guys know the places, those of you that are directly involved in the energy sector, you know the places that are impacting you. It's probably worth your time to consider looking at the maps, considering where this may impact you and the assets you have, maybe places where you could partner with providers to get service to those areas, but also just to be aware of the fact there's going to be, in the next couple or several years, a lot of major construction going on in these areas. There's going to be requests for right-of-way access or pole access. There's going to be construction and deployment, whether that's aerial or buried, going on in these areas. And the other thing to keep in mind from the purely economic development standpoint is hopefully this helps re-energize some of our rural areas. I can tell you anecdotally, it has in several small towns that have access. I think it was Houston, Missouri, did label themselves as the remote work capital of Missouri. They've got beautiful scenery and lakes and outdoor activities, and they had great broadband. And so you will see things like that pop up. There's a quilt shop in north central Missouri that was just a quilt shop. They served, but because of the power of the internet, the mother or grandmother of the family became world famous. She puts quilts together on YouTube, and now people come from all over the United States to shop at their quilt shop. They have revitalized their entire downtown because of one business who had a connection, who now is able to draw. People come in tour buses to come look at this quilt shop and buy quilt pieces. It's not my thing, but it's other people's, right? And that's one of the interesting things about the internet. I was on vacation this last summer, and we were kind of forced to sit at dinner with people we didn't know. And 2 of the 5 couples made fantastic incomes based off internet-based businesses in rural areas. One was down in the Joplin area, and the other was outside of Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, one sold wreaths on the internet and does fantastic, employs tens of people, has gigantic space, and does millions of dollars worth of business selling wreaths and wreath parts, decorative wreaths. I mean, it just blew my mind. But it just goes to show you, and I was on a podcast the other day talking about what is the potential? What do you hope this does? And as someone from rural Missouri, not every town is going to have that, right? But it gives you the opportunity to, every small town in Southeast Missouri had a shoe shop or a plastics plant or something like that 10, 20, 30 years ago. And those things have slowly gone away. I'm not saying this brings them all back, but hopefully it does allow some revitalization in those areas that doesn't happen otherwise. But as energy providers, you also need to be prepared for that. There is the chance that this revitalizes areas and allows you all to sell more energy, but also the ability to need more energy in those areas. And for those of you all doing deployment things, know that hopefully this project brings the connectivity that you need for the resources you have in place to be able to connect those places too. So that's my spiel, and I would be happy to answer questions if there are any.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that the Missouri Star Quilt Shop?
Yes, it is.
I use one of their YouTube videos every time I finish a quilt, and I found them like 5 years ago when I was in Virginia.
That's fantastic. See, I didn't just make it up. It's real. and people come from all around. And from what I hear, they've expanded greatly and revitalized a lot of town.
A question on your map. I don't know if you can go back
Yeah.
to
The big one or the
individuals? Yeah, those individual ones. If I'm seeing right on the map on the left-hand side, you've got like individual red dots in the sea of green. And I know those other funded programs are not your programs, but how does that happen? How can you have a single location in the sea of, oh yeah, we're gonna build out, but except your house right here or your business?
Well, we have made the biggest advancement we've made, and one of the big things we all argued for early pushers of broadband were in the past, programs have been awarded by census blocks or census block groups. And because those have odd boundaries, that's how you see places being left out or overlapped. The other thing is some of those programs actually had like almost individual criteria. And so you will see like a block of probably higher income homes left out of a program, even though they were just as expensive to bring service to. And so you would see like criteria then, made people not eligible for the funding. And that's what you see in some of that. Now, these are very much preliminary maps. Like I said, we're going to approve these maps, and that provider might tell us, oh, that was incorrectly mapped and we're going to catch those houses. But if they're going to, we're not going to rule those places out unless they say they can do it within about a year, because we don't want to delay services in those places. But just like being realistic, that provider who was awarded that area is most likely to be the one who can efficiently reach those places too. And when it comes to saving our grant money, we're hopeful that our money to bring service to those last remaining places also makes that project more likely to be finished quickly. But that was a huge change that happened in preparation for this. In the past, all broadband mapping was done based on census block. And so if you looked at a map, you would see this, oh, one place is served, so it looked like every place was served. That's what we all complained about. The one of a block being served meant everybody was considered served. And so that's how you saw a lot of locations being left out. Yes.
Oh, sorry. What's the origin of all the funding for the infrastructure that's being built out? Once you get it, you're paying for a service. Where's all the funding coming from for the infrastructure build out?
It's the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, the bipartisan infrastructure.
It's the federal government.
Yes, sir.
That is putting all the infrastructure in.
That's right.
To these underserved areas.
Yes.
Okay, the same people that complain about the federal government are benefiting from all these infrastructure dollars.
I don't know if that was a question.
No, it was a comment.
Sorry, Senator.
That's what that.
Is there a requirement to that point, once you build it, is there a requirement under this in terms of affordability and,
yes.
For service once it's you have the ability for access?
Yes, there is. There is both there are two different affordability factors as factors of the grant program, as put out by NTIA. There's a middle class affordability factor, meaning you can't overprice it, so most people can't afford it. And then there's also a low income affordability factor, and both are necessary criteria. The low income, we have draft guidelines out now of how we will implement those. And so it's obviously very touchy to the providers. You're talking about what are we charging after you helped us award it. And you're also talking about places that are costly to deploy to and costly to service, or else they would probably already have service, right? And so it is a very touchy conversation. We started the conversation on the low income side at $30 a month. which means if you qualified for the ACP program and took advantage of it, the service would essentially be free to the end user and the provider is made whole. And on the middle class affordability, we started at about $100 a month. And then the providers we're taking public comment on that, and we will respond to that in our second draft that we turn in as our actual proposal of how to implement it.
Have you looked at the Appalachian Power pilot in Virginia in the development of your BEAD plan? Because they recruited the utility to do the outreach because the utility already knows who's low income, who's income qualified and whatnot. And
Yeah.
they're serving everyone.
So I visited with the Virginia Broadband Office quite a bit. It's not necessarily about that side of the conversation, but I'd be happy to. I know that some of the energy companies in Missouri have been interested in at least facilitating over those lines, and that's a very tough conversation at the legislature. And it's an ongoing
Not
conversation.
gonna lie,
Yeah.
they know who qualifies.
Oh,
So they
absolutely.
don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
They already have this relationship.
That's a great point.
And then in the Appalachian Power, they actually did an RFP to find the participating providers, someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
You just touched on it. I was wondering if you can give any insight, right? And you said places are rocky and hard to get to, but just every one of those dots either has a gas line or an electric line there. I know it's been brought up for at least the last 2 years of using those lines or poles as riders. Any insight you can provide on how you think that might shake out here this coming session? Considering that you have deployed, you've been successful, but you're starting to see some harder to reach places and you've got this other money that maybe it makes more sense now?
Yeah, when I took this job, I totally quit guessing what any legislative body might choose to do. Because my opinion, only matters, especially at the federal side, it only matters this much. The state side, it might matter a little bit more, but I wouldn't guess what they're gonna do. But along those lines, in our 5-year plan, we were asked to put together a 5-year plan. We were asked to address things like this. And in the 5-year plan, we do actually say that this is a bill that's been brought up to allow the facilitation of broadband over IOUs, and that we actually think it would be an asset to the deployment and allow it to happen faster if that were allowed to happen. So we have put that out there kind of, that yes, it would be helpful. But it is a legislative battle that has gone for at least a couple of years, and sometimes those don't move. And it would be difficult for me to imagine it moving really quickly before this happens.
I did have another question based off of some earlier ones. You talked about pricing requirements. Is there long-term service requirements as well?
So there are periods of performance, and I think most states are doing 5 or 10 years out of the grant and the completion. The NTIA largely governs that by federal government granting rules. We facilitate it, they do the standards, but I think it's 5 or 10 years of having it. The other real hope is you're investing in hard infrastructure, and that if one wasn't able to continue, that someone else would be able to, right? That you're not just seeing, dark wire out there or fixed wireless. But yes, there are federal grant guidelines that govern kind of when you sign on to this, you're also saying this will have service for the foreseeable future. Yes, sir.
This is terrible, I don't even know, what could go wrong? What's the biggest sort of danger or fear out there that look back in 10 years and this sort of potential wasn't fulfilled?
There's 2 things, in my opinion, and that's a great question, but there's 2 things in my opinion. One is that we get all of our projects done, and that some of these federal awarded areas don't get done. And then we have approximately 200,000 locations that were federally funded that didn't get done. Largely, I say that because most of these federal programs were reverse auction, which really incentivized people to drive down the price that they were asking for. And we hear from a large number of people that they don't believe that the price that the awarded provider asked for is high enough to actually get the job done. And so that's one of my biggest fears, is that the federal awards don't get done. To their credit, many of these awarded providers are moving. I mean, these projects are happening. They're measured on a statewide basis, so although it may not be happening in Bullinger County, it's happening in kind of western Missouri and southwestern, and then you assume that provider is then moving to that area. And so to their credit, they are moving, I see that. The second big fear is willing providers. We have to have willing providers to go to these locations. And although we have a big number, $1.7 billion is huge, right? That's really big to most of us. But we also takes a willing provider to be able to do it. And there are federal guidelines that come along with this program. They're talking about the affordability of the service that they're providing. We're talking about the quality of the service they're providing. We're talking about service to everyone. There's match requirements, there's letters of credit requirements, and so there are federal requirements that go along with this that may, dissuade some from being ready to jump in with both feet. So those are the two things that kind of concern me. But we're hopeful. We're going to work hard. What I spend a lot of my time doing is talking to providers and trying to show them the opportunities and let them determine where they can go efficiently.
Everyone, please join me in thanking BJ for his time. All right, next up is Nathan Tutt with USDA. They have a ton of programs going on. That's really nice what BJ was talking about. So Nathan, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning on one of the programs that we administer at USDA, rural development. Again, my name is Nathan Tutt. I've been with rural development for about 20 years. Originally raised on a small farm in Carroll County, Missouri, North Central Missouri. And we have a staff of about 70 employees that serve with rural development. The USDA has about 30 different sub-agencies. Rural development is just one of those agencies. We're kind of like the credit arm of the agency. If you're familiar with the old Farmers Home Administration back in the 70s and 80s, we're part of that program where Farm Service Agency and Natural Resource Conservation Service, we're called Rural Development. Again, we have about 70 staff members. We've got 25 different field offices around the state, and I currently work in our state office in Columbia, Missouri. So today, I just want to hit on one program. It's called the Rural Energy for America program. We help out either small businesses or ag producers. And the exciting thing for this program is the Inflation Reduction Act. We were given over $2 billion to spend. This is nationwide over the next few years to help out eligible entity types. So here are the options. There are grant programs, loan guarantees, or combination grant loan guarantee. In order to be eligible for this program, you either have to be an ag producer, and we define the term ag producer as greater than 50% of your household income that's directly tied to ag operations, or a small business that's located in a rural setting. You do have to be a for-profit small business. Non-profit businesses are not eligible. There is a website that you can go to see if you have a small business, to see if it qualifies for this program or not. So under the program, there are two different options: a renewable energy system or energy efficiency improvements. Here are some examples of renewables: solar, wind, anaerobic digesters, geothermal. The program's been dominated largely by solar arrays the past decade or so, because you can stack the federal tax credit and any local utility rebates on top of our grant opportunity. Energy efficiency improvements. These are some examples of what small businesses or farmers can look at doing for their operations: replacing lighting, HVAC systems. We've done some irrigation conversions from diesel to electric as well. So the opportunity, the program's been around for about 20 years. Historically, the grant has been up to 25% of the total eligible project cost. Due to the Inflation Reduction Act, that grant now is up to 50% of the total eligible project cost. So it's really an exciting time for any eligible for-profit small business or ag producer. This is just a little graph that talks about minimum grant amounts up to the maximum. The maximum grant was recently doubled, not only on the percentage from 25 to 50, but it also was doubled on the dollar amount. So a maximum renewable grant right now is up to 1 million. So you'd be looking at least a $2 million plus project in order to qualify for that $1 million grant. On the efficiency side, max is 500,000. The guaranteed loan program, this is a lender-driven program. Typically, we're talking several $100,000 or millions of dollars on a total project cost. And this program is where we would receive an application from a lender. We would review that and offer a guarantee up to 8%. The maximum loan currently is 25 million. Our state approval authority is up to 10 million. So any projects over 10 would go to our national office for another review. The application deadlines, we accept applications year round. Due to the Inflation Reduction Act, we moved to a quarterly competition. So every 3 months, we're going to be making funding decisions and accepting those applications for review. So the next cycle or deadline is 12/31, but since that falls on a weekend, it moves to the next business day. So January 2nd will be the next quarterly deadline for the program.
Is that spread out over the 10-year term then of IRA?
As far as I know, yes. We do have grant writers available on request. It's not a requirement, but it is an option. A lot of small business owners or farmers don't have a lot of time to sit down and fill out an application. The application is about 8 or 9 pages. And there are 4 or 5 forms in addition to that you have to complete for a complete application. Typically, we get about $1 million of funding in the state of Missouri for grants. The last 2 quarters, March and June, we funded over 14 million. So the news is getting out there about this opportunity of a 50% grant, so it's a pretty exciting time. And then I always try to stress to people the phrase, apply before you buy. So if a small business or a farm has already went out and spent the money and started a project, and then they hear about the program, hey, can I still apply for your grant? And the answer is no. So we have to have an application in hand in order for that to be eligible. Okay. Eligible project costs for the purchase and installation of equipment, post application. So again, apply before you buy. What's not eligible? Residential components like a house, a farm, or a small business is tied, wants to put up a solar array and connect it to their house. That on the same meter, that's not eligible. They had to put up a separate meter in order for that to qualify. Lease payments, land credit, equipment, those are also not eligible. And then here are some examples of some former awards that was back when it was a 25% grant, just to give you an idea of different projects that we funded around the country. Vet hospital. This is an anaerobic digester in the Pacific Northwest. Received both a grant and a loan. A grocery store, a geothermal system. We've assisted a lot of ag producers with poultry, barns, and swine facilities. They're seeing significant savings, whether it's through energy efficiency or solar arrays. example of a nursery. Manufacturing, did some lighting, a lot of the lighting, retrofits. We're seeing payback periods, less than, 2 or 3 years, in some instances around 24/7. Grocery stores, another example. So this is a quick overview on the program. There's my contact information. If you want to send me an email, I can share with you the application materials and additional resources anytime. So, thank you.
Any questions for Nathan?
There may be a lot of overlap some places, but I'm looking at projects that may be doing biochar and sequestration in terms of carbon reduction. And does USDA go for things like that, or is that an EPA kind of thing?
If there's energy savings involved, we could take a look at it.
We'll be looking at combined heat and power in conjunction with that. So it's production, not savings.
Yeah, energy generation projects are eligible. It would have to pass a technical review, probably from our national office. So in that case, I would say whatever you're looking at, you can send me the specifics on it. I can look into it further for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
How are you promoting the program? Are you working with, check out boards, spread the word,
yeah, we have a public information department at the agency. Again, the program's been around for 20+ years, and historically it's been a grant opportunity up to 25%, but now it's up to 50%. So the news is getting out there without a lot of marketing. So again, we had 151 applications for March and June, and we were able to fund 150 of those. Now, as time goes on, news gets out there, it's going to be more and more competitive. The grant is not a guarantee. You have to submit an application, and we have a score sheet that we look at, and then I can share that score sheet. The score sheet we use in Missouri is the same as any other state across the country. But going forward, for every quarter, I expect our state to get about $4 million of grant funds. For the quarter ending September 30th of this year, we had right at $7 million in grant requests for the $4 million in allocation. Now, for those that don't score high enough in that initial round, they automatically roll into the next quarter's competition. And we have opportunities to pick up additional funding from National Office Reserve competitions based on other states' activity. If they don't have the pipeline that we have here, they can pick up some additional funds. And we've been able to do that, fortunately, the last several years. Yes.
Do you know, are Native American tribal communities eligible for these energy efficiency funds? They are?
Yes, they are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Could you go back one slide so I could get your email? Thanks.
And as a reminder, as usual, all the slides, the presentations will be available after the conference.
You answered my question.
Okay.
Yes.
When do you expect all the additional IRA funds to be needed? Like you guys added, 4 program periods this year, 4 program periods for next year. I mean, what's the timeline or your guess on when those funds are going to be gone?
That's a great question. I know that the program is going to be fully funded through September 30th of 2024. And I would expect the program to continue after that funding level as well, but I don't have a definite answer there.
Yeah.
Are you partnering with anyone to provide technical assistance or energy audits in terms of filling out, getting the application completed?
Yes, so there was a new program that just launched in August called the READ TAG program, Technical Assistance Grants. And we had a dozen applications, highly competitive from all over the country. And we were able to select 3 providers from the state of Missouri. And they're available, and I can email those to you. They're part of our list of grant writers that are available that have the skills and experience necessary to come out to perform an energy audit or assessment.
Nathan, on that point, are they companies or companies? Are they names that you can share?
Yeah, they're companies.
Yeah, if you want to share it with us, we can add it to your slide deck before we send it out, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like, you want that type of thing out there,
Yeah,
if that works.
be great.
Because I know when we get on the pay side, when we get calls, a lot, it's usually people have no idea what's going on. And so being able to direct them there, that's our first step for rural projects is look to access the REAP dollars, if they can have some help that grant, which is great.
Yeah, we have a list of about a dozen or so different grant writers. They're not all located in the state of Missouri, but they've got years of experience dealing with their program. And like I say, this comes down to your client's time and interest level of what they have to, sit down, fill out the application, go through the forms. And we have a team of about 7 members on our team that can also, walk them through the application as well.
Nathan, can you talk at all about the other programs that USDA has created due to the IRA? Example, the other PACE program that you all have? You have a couple that are energy related outside of just, are you able to talk about those?
I don't have a lot of, knowledge on, the other programs. Rural development, we administer over 40 different programs. There's a housing program division where we make direct loans for individuals based on household size and income. We guarantee loans to banks, whether there's a no money down, no EMI, program. That program generates typically over $500 million a year for the state of Missouri. Nationwide, rural development, we have over a $220 billion portfolio that we service. Not a lot of people realize that, but it's there's a lot of loan and grant programs that we're involved with. So that's on the housing side. We also have a community program division where we make service loans for rural communities that have needs for water, waste infrastructure, hospitals, fire stations, etc. And then I'm in the business program division where we have about 15 to 20 different programs that we administer. And the READ program is just one of those.
Any other questions? All right, if you'll join me in thanking Nathan for his time. All right, that wraps up our first morning sessions. We're gonna have about 15 to, we'll say it's a 20-minute break back here at 11. There's still the coffee and tea and orange juice and breakfast stuff here in the kitchen area. Reminder, the bathrooms are you go to the registration desk and turn right. Men is first, women is the second door. Thank you all very much.